Hey, gang. So today we're going to talk about the characteristics of civilization and then look specifically at one of those characteristics, which was government, and look at a case study in Mesopotamia. So we've kind of gone over these before, the characteristics of civilizations as we saw them rise in those early river civilizations. They included advanced cities. We watched a video on that. Advanced cities facilitated trade. They had lots of art and architecture. People started to specialize and work in these, and they got pretty large for ancient times. 65,000 people living in a city. That's the size of Twin Falls. So they became pretty big. The next characteristic is government. When you have large groups of people living together, you have to have a centralized government, some way to organize those people, to have some laws, to preserve law and order and justice. And we're going to look specifically at Hammurabi's Code, which was the first legal set of laws written down ever in world history. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Record keeping was necessary. That included keeping track of laws, but also track of commerce and trade. It starts by keeping track of taxation and receipts for exchange of goods. And so people start writing things down. In Mesopotamia, this evolves in cuneiform writing on clay tablets. In Egypt, it takes the form of hieroglyphics. And you see in China, these oracle bones were used to document things as well. So just writing straight on bones. You also need in these large areas new technologies to make work easier, but also to deal with the everyday life of large populations living in a concentrated area. So this includes farming technologies to make, for example, metal plows to plow and till your fields, to sewer systems. What do you do with all that human waste? And so very early on, you start to see technology in public works and things that would benefit the public good. Public works will also include ways to entertain people. You'll start to see the development of stadiums and coliseums for entertainment and plays. That leads to our art and architecture. You have people who are freed up from just basic survival to be able to create art. You have the building of monuments to honor gods and religious institutions, and to make sure that you know that the government is really strong. This included jewelry, painting, pyramids, the Acropolis in Greece, all sorts of major construction going on, and people being interested in the arts, music. We start to see literature. You're going to read in ninth grade the Odyssey, which is an epic poem that was written. It's not the first one, but you start to get these stories that start as an oral tradition but get handed down and then ultimately written down as well. And through all of that, you have people that form religions. Our entire next unit is going to stop and pause and look at some of these ancient religions and those that have lasted into today because they've had a huge impact on global history. But civilizations created religions to answer questions that they couldn't answer. And it helps them maintain order. It gives people moral and ethical guidelines, and it answers questions for them like what happens when we die, why does the sun rise and set. Most of these early religions are called polytheistic, meaning they worshipped multiple gods or goddesses, and sometimes cities would have their own patron god or goddess that they specifically worship within a whole range of other gods and goddesses. You also have specialized workers. Now that everybody's not hunting and gathering, you have people that start to divide up work, and labor starts to be divided, and people specialize in an area. You have blacksmiths who work on metalwork and metallurgy. You have scribes who learn to write things. You have priests who are in charge of the religion and the religious faith, and you have farmers and peasants. All of this also ultimately results in a social class division that you start to see evolve in these places. It's no longer egalitarian, everybody's working for everybody's survival. It's I've got to do my job. And some people perceive their job as being more or less in terms of greatness than others. So you start to see this in their artistic imagery as well. These are images from ancient Egypt of men doing various work. You have folks doing pottery down here, carving, all kinds of things being done. You get these ranked groups based on your job standing or economic status, which is part of your social class that evolves, and it include the king. So that takes us to our government. Most of these governments were monarchies. Sometimes they were oligarchies. We're going to do an entire unit on governments as well in a little bit. But Hammurabi was a pharaoh or a king of a portion of Mesopotamia called Babylon in the 1700s before the current era, BCE. So we're going to look at his code and look at it to figure out why his code is useful for us to understand pre-ancient times and what are the limitations of just looking at that and what other information we might need. So first of all, who was Hammurabi? He was from what was known as the Amorite dynasty. He was king of Babylon from 1792 to 1750 BCE. Babylon was part of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is just a general term for a range of civilizations that were between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Babylon being an empire, and it's actually an empire mentioned quite a bit in the Bible. So Hammurabi, as the king, unifies this empire, and so he creates a standardized set of laws that apply to all of society. And he had them written down and he had them publicized. He put them on a monument in the middle of town squares so that everyone knew the rules and everybody could follow them. This is what it actually looked like. So really small on here, you can see all of this cuneiform writing on here demonstrates the actual rules, and people have translated them. Here's Babylon in between the Tigris and Euphrates in this time period. You can see all of these are city-states. They all had their own kings, and they were all in this fertile, what we call the Fertile Crescent, which is part of Mesopotamia. So the question we're going to try and answer by looking at Hammurabi's code, what can we learn about Mesopotamia from it, and was it fair when we look at it? So now you're going to go and do some primary document analysis. All right, have a good one.